You think you could quietly launder money and actually make bank doing it. Everyone thinks that. But here's the math that stops you cold. The average convicted money launderer in the United States nets $11 an hour. $11. After prison time. That's less than what a fast food shift manager makes, and they get health insurance. So before you spend six figures building fake businesses and bribing accountants, let us walk through exactly why this does not work. The numbers are brutal, and they are public record. This video is for educational, historical, and entertainment purposes only. Everything presented comes from published court records, federal agency data, and academic research. Nothing here is financial advice, legal advice, or an encouragement to commit any crime. The entire point is to prove mathematically that this is a terrible idea. Please enjoy watching us prove it. So you want to be a money launderer. You've watched the movies. You liked those spreadsheets in Ozark. You figure you're a numbers person. You're good with detail. Maybe you even have an accounting degree. You know who else has accounting degrees? The forensic analysts at FinCEN who will eventually read every single transaction you touched. The average convicted money launderer in the United States nets roughly $11 per hour. That's after you factor in time served behind bars. That's less than a shift manager at a fast food restaurant, and the shift manager gets health insurance. Let us walk through the math together. First, let's talk about the illusion, the big number that gets people excited. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has published a widely cited global estimate. Somewhere between $800 billion and $2 trillion is laundered worldwide every year. That sounds enormous, like an ocean of untraceable cash sloshing around the planet. And your brain does the thing every amateur criminal brain does. It assumes you get to keep some meaningful portion of that ocean. You do not. Picture a giant mountain of cash on a table. Now picture yourself standing next to it with a teaspoon. That teaspoon is your actual cut. The individual money launderer is a service provider. You do not keep the money, you move the money. Your fee for moving it is typically between 5 and 12%. So on $1 million processed, you might gross $50,000 to $120,000. That is the ceiling, and that is before expenses, and before bribes, and before everyone else takes their slice. Less than 1% of global illicit financial flows are actually intercepted. People hear that and then think the odds are incredible. But interception rate and detection rate are completely different animals. FinCEN received over 4 million suspicious activity reports in fiscal year 2022. The net is enormous even if the haul is small. Someone is watching. Someone is always watching. They just haven't knocked on your door yet. Look, let's get real about what this actually costs. Because passion doesn't pay the bills. Capital does. You want to move money? Fine. But before you see your first clean dollar, you're dropping serious cash on infrastructure. Real infrastructure. You need front businesses, cash-heavy operations, car washes, laundromats, nail salons, restaurants. Places where thousands of small transactions every single day don't raise an eyebrow. That's your cover. That's your story. Then you're setting up legal entities, registered agents, state filings, the whole bureaucratic dance. One entity costs you $1,000 to $5,000. But smart operators? They don't stop at one. Multiple entities spread the risk, spread the liability, spread the paperwork across a wider net. More complexity means harder to trace. You're leasing commercial space, real leases, real locations, and you're actually running these businesses, convincingly, not half-assing it. That's $2,000 to $8,000 a month just in rent per location, every single month. Money out the door before you've made a dime. Then comes the actual operation, inventory, equipment, point-of-sale systems, real employees doing real work. The initial setup for one business? $10,000 to $50,000 depending on what you're running. But here's where it gets expensive. You need people. Corrupt accountants who'll cook your books. Attorneys who know how to structure things just right. Notaries willing to stamp whatever you put in front of them. Their retainers? $5,000 to $50,000 a year, each. You're buying bookkeeping software that generates records clean enough to survive an audit. Another $1,000 to $5,000. Then you're making seed deposits, real money, clean money, just to establish banking relationships that look legitimate. 10 to 30,000 in capital you're literally burning to build credibility. Do the math. First year of a modest operation, you're spending $75,000 to $200,000 before Commission 1 hits your account. You're running a business that hemorrhages money, intentionally. Picture it. Some depressing car wash in a strip mall. Looks legitimate from the street, but inside, it's a money furnace, and you're feeding it your own cash. Here's what gets people caught. Anomalies. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division isn't looking for geniuses, they're looking for patterns. A laundromat in rural Ohio reporting revenue like a Manhattan dry cleaner? That's a red flag. They've got spreadsheets, they've got patience, and they've got time. You've dropped serious money building this whole operation. Now here's where it gets real. Let's talk about what it actually costs to keep this machine running. Every single person touching your money wants their piece. The original source, the guy who made the dirty cash in the first place, he takes the lion's share. Then your corrupt professionals line their pockets. Your front business isn't fake on paper only, it's got real bills, real utilities, real payroll, real rent. You're looking at $3 to $10,000 a month just to keep the facade standing. That's before anything else. Now throw in the banking side. You're paying off people inside the bank to look the other way? That's 5 to 15% on every single transaction. Then you've got your cash couriers, the actual people moving stacks of bills in small chunks to avoid detection. They want $500 to $2,000 per run. Your communication setup, burner phones, encrypted apps, all that security infrastructure, that's running you $500 to $1,000 every month. But here's the part that really cuts deep. You've got to pay taxes, real taxes, on fake money. Because if your car wash reports $300,000 in annual revenue and somehow pays nothing to the IRS, they don't just shrug, they show up. So you're cutting a check for 15 to 25% of money that was never actually yours in the first place. You're literally paying the government to launder your own cash. And you need a criminal defense attorney on retainer. Not because you're paranoid, because you're smart. That's another $5,000 to $20,000 a year, just sitting there, waiting for the day you need it. Add it all up, small operation. $120,000 to $300,000 a year. Just overhead. Just the cost of existing. Your commission isn't growing. It's getting strangled by the system you built to collect it. Imagine a line of people passing a bag of money down the chain. Every hand it passes through takes a chunk. By the time it reaches you at the end, the bag is nearly empty. Now imagine one of those hands is wearing a wire. Middlemen are the #1 source of cooperating witnesses. The Department of Justice data is clear on this. The majority of successful financial crime prosecutions come down to testimony from a co-conspirator who flipped. Every person in your chain is a potential informant. Your entire supply line is made of snitches. More people means more exposure. More exposure means more risk. That's not theory. That's how the system actually works. FinCEN. So let's talk about risk, the thing that actually kills the whole operation. Yeah, global fund interception sits under 1%. Sounds good, right? Wrong. Individual operator detection inside the United States? That's a completely different animal. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit, IRS Criminal Investigation, and the DOJ Money Laundering and Asset Recovery section, they're all running simultaneously. All of them. And here's the thing. Once charges get formally filed, the federal conviction rate exceeds 90%. 90. Once they come for you, it's essentially over. Federal sentencing guidelines for money laundering under Title 18, Section 1956, up to 20 years per count. In practice, most defendants are looking at 6 to 10 years. But here's where it gets worse. Money laundering charges never come alone. Prosecutors stack conspiracy, wire fraud, tax evasion, RICO charges on top of each other. You're not fighting one charge, you're fighting 5. Average total sentence with all that stacked? 10 to 15 years. That's a decade plus of your life gone. And then conviction hits. Every single asset traceable to the operation gets seized through forfeiture. Cars, houses, bank accounts, all of it. Your net worth doesn't just drop. It goes to zero or negative. You're done. The longer an operation runs, the higher your cumulative detection probability becomes. Picture a giant countdown clock on the wall, labeled 3 to 5 years. Next to it, a probability gauge creeping slowly from green into red. The longer you operate, the more certain the ending becomes. That's not a maybe, that's math. U.S. Sentencing Commission data shows hundreds of federal money laundering convictions every single year. The typical defendant? An adult in their prime earning years who bet wrong. That's it. That's the story. Hashtag YouTube script rewrite. Alright, so now we got all the pieces. Time to do the math on what you're actually making per hour. Let's take a mid-level operator, right? Someone grinding for 3 to 5 years. Over that stretch, they're moving $2 to $5 million through the system. At 8% commission, that's $160,000 to $400,000 gross. Sounds good on paper. Then you subtract startup costs, $75,000 to $200,000 just to get rolling. Then comes the operating overhead stacking up year after year. $360,000, sometimes over $1 million. And here's the thing, in most cases, you're actually in the red. Negative. You lost money. But let's be generous. Let's say you ran a tight ship, got lucky, and actually came out ahead. $40,000 to $150,000 in net earnings. That's your best case. Now here's where it gets real. You worked 40 to 60 hours every single week for 3 to 5 years. That's roughly 6,000 to 15,000 hours of your life. But that's not the full picture. Add in the incarceration time. 6 to 10 years. 6 to 10 years staring at a wall, making $0. That's a staggering number of hours. So you take your total net earnings, let's say the best case scenario, and you divide it by your total hours, both the working hours and the prison hours. The risk-adjusted hourly rate comes out to roughly $8 to $14 per hour. Picture this, a giant calculator on the wall. Each variable gets punched in one at a time. The running total shrinks with every deduction. Then the final number sits there, circled in red. $11.40. Now, picture a bar chart right next to it. Money launderer, $11. Walmart associate, $15 to $16, plus benefits. Hospital janitor, $17 to $18, plus a pension. Licensed plumber, $28 to $30 with a retirement account. Your bar is the shortest one there, and your bar comes with a felony record attached to it. That felony doesn't just disappear. Research from the Brennan Center for Justice shows it reduces your lifetime earnings by up to 22%. Other studies put the number different places, but the damage is always massive. The financial hit extends decades past your prison sentence. You're still paying for it when you're supposed to be building something real. Now, let's talk about exit strategies, because every business plan needs one. And here's the thing. There are basically 4 doors available to the professional money launderer. Door number 1 is federal prison. The majority of laundering careers that actually get caught, they end here. Door number 2 is violent retaliation from your criminal clients. And I'm not talking about complaints to management. I'm talking about real consequences. Door number 3 is fleeing the country and living as a fugitive with your resources constantly shrinking. Most get tracked eventually through Interpol and mutual legal assistance treaties. Door number 4 is cooperating with federal prosecutors and entering witness protection. That means your old identity, your old life, everything you accumulated, it's permanently gone. Then there's the mythical 5th door, the tiny one in the corner with cobwebs on it, the clean getaway where you keep your wealth. Statistically, it basically doesn't exist. Look at the Wachovia case, hundreds of billions in suspicious transactions moving through. The bank paid a $160 million settlement. Liberty Reserve laundered roughly $6 billion before its founder got 20 years. HSBC, a global bank with enormous legal resources and teams of lawyers, paid nearly $2 billion in penalties. If institutions that massive can't escape consequences, then your strip mall car wash doesn't stand a chance. So here's what you're actually looking at. The money you'd make? Fin. We're talking 5 to 12% of whatever flows through your hands. You drop $75,000 to $200,000 just to get started. Then overhead? It bleeds you dry every single month. And here's where it gets real. The people you're working with, the middlemen, they'll flip on you in a heartbeat if it saves their skin. They'll testify. They'll walk. You stay. The longer you're in the game, the hotter you get. Detection probability climbs. And once the feds actually charge you, 90% conviction rate. That's not a risk. That's a guarantee. You're looking at 6 to 10 years minimum, and that's if you're lucky. Stack a few charges together, and you're doing 15, 20, maybe more. Everything you own? Gone. They take it all. Asset forfeiture doesn't ask questions. Do the math on your hourly rate. $8 to $14. That's what you're really making when you account for the risk. And then there's the felony. That follows you forever. Your lifetime earnings take a permanent hit. Now flip the script. A licensed plumber in America? $28 to $30 an hour. Easy. Benefits. Retirement. Weekends with your family. Zero federal prosecution. Nobody's investigating his bank transfers. Nobody's wearing a wire on his job site. Nobody's seizing his truck. The plumber wins. The plumber always wins. You thought you wanted to be a money launderer. The math says you should want to be a plumber.